Frank Getting. In the darkness and confusion, the attackers wreaked havoc before withdrawing. The cruisers USS Quincy and USS Vincennes were sunk. The destroyers USS Ralph Talbot and USS Patterson were damaged. The USS Astoria was so badly damaged that it eventually sank. The next day, USS Selfridge fired 263 5-inch shells and 4 torpedoes into Canberra. But the stubborn Canberra refused to sink until a torpedo fired by USS Ellett administered the final blow. Canberra sank at about 8 a.m. on the 9th of August, 1942. The United States Navy Baltimore-class cruiser USS Canberra was later named in her honour, the only American warship named for a foreign warship or a foreign capital city. Today, we remember HMAS Canberra and the Battle of Savo Island. We pay our respects to the men and women commemorated here on the Roll of Honour and to the survivors who returned home. We warmly welcome the family of Electrical Artificer First Class Ernest Harrison, whose story will be told shortly. We also warmly welcome Mr. Alex McGowan, Vice President of the Naval Association of Australia, ACT, Mr. John King, President of the Returned and Services League of Australia, ACT branch, and Dr. Catherine Sperling on behalf of the Australian War Widows. We welcome the veterans who have served, those who are still serving, and the families that love and support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria and RSL Queensland, who are watching a broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the pool of reflection by family, by visitors to the memorial, and by students on behalf of St Helens Park Public School, New South Wales. If you are able, would you now please stand and join us in singing the National Anthem? Those requiring a seat, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths and floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Ernest Harrison was born about 1902 or 1905 in Sunderland, England. the son of Granville and Mary Jane Harrison. His father was a joiner, while his mother took on laundry work for some time, and he had an elder brother, Oswald. In 1920, Mary Jane Harrison, Oswald and Ernest migrated from the United Kingdom to Australia, travelling aboard the P&O liner Benalla and arriving in Sydney on the 1st of July. Already possessing some skills and experience as a fitter, Ernest enlisted in the Royal Australian Navy on 9th of May 1924, signing on for 12 years service. He spent his first 2 years at HMAS Cerberus, the Navy's training base in Western Port Bay, southeast of Melbourne. Ernest began learning his craft as an electrical artificer, working on the electrical maintenance of ships' generators and engines. Between 1926 and 1928, Ernest had his first postings to ships, including periods in HMAS Sydney, Adelaide and Brisbane. In 1927, he married Dorothy May Matthews at Drummoyne in Sydney. The couple went on to have 2 children, Patricia, born in 1929, and Alan, born in 1931. Ernest was at HMAS Penguin, a naval base and training establishment in Sydney's eastern suburbs, adjacent to Garden Island on Sydney Harbour, for most of 1929, where he earned further qualifications. In January 1930, he joined HMAS Canberra before returning to Penguin, where he remained until January 1932. Following a posting to the seaplane tender HMAS Albatross the following year, Ernest found himself drafted to the heavy cruiser HMAS Australia, in which he served from July 1933 to October 1934. With his 12 years of service complete by May 1936, Ernest signed on for another 5 years. Further periods at Cerberus and Penguin were followed by posting to HMAS Yarra in 1937. By then, he had advanced to Electrical Artificer Class 1 with 15 years' experience serving on a variety of different ships. Over the years of his service, Ernest was always of good character, and he received multiple good conduct badges. This culminated in his award of the Long Service and Good Conduct Medal on the 9th of May 1939 while serving in HMAS Adelaide. With war now looming, Ernest rejoined the heavy cruiser HMAS Canberra on 15 June 1939. At the outbreak of hostilities in September 1939, Canberra was patrolling home waters. In June 1940, under the command of Captain Harold Farncombe, the ship began a lengthy period of service in the Indian Ocean, patrolling and escorting convoys and on the hunt for German raiders. During this time, Ernest extended his service for another 5 years. When Japan entered the war in December 1941, HMAS Canberra was alongside in Sydney. She soon commenced escort duties for ships bound for New Guinea, the Dutch East Indies and Malaya. Canberra underwent an extensive refit in Sydney between February and May 1942 and was in harbour the night of the 31st of May when Japanese midget submarines attacked. In June 1942, Canberra, now under the command of Captain Frank Getting, took part in a sweep northwards into the Coral Sea as part of the US-led Task Force 44. The previous month, the Japanese had taken control of some key points in the Solomon Islands, establishing air bases and threatening communications between the United States and Australia. In order to wrest back control of the Solomon Islands, the US 1st Marine Division made a seaborne landing on 7 August 1942, quickly seizing Tulagi and nearby islands, including Guadalcanal. HMAS Canberra was among the screening force covering the marine landings. At first, there was little Japanese resistance, but trouble was brewing. A strike force of 7 Japanese cruisers and a destroyer was steaming from Rabaul, with orders to attack and destroy the Allied transports unloading at Guadalcanal. Despite being observed, Allied intelligence and communication failures ensured luck held for the Japanese. In the early hours of 9 August, the Japanese arrived off Savo Island and took the Allied ships by surprise. Canberra was patrolling between Savo Island and the northwestern tip of Guadalcanal, along with other US Navy ships, when at 1:45 a.m. flares lit up the darkness. 2 radar-equipped US destroyers failed to detect the Japanese warships, which rapidly closed for action. Both forces launched torpedoes, but the Japanese were the first to engage with their big guns. Canberra, having lost all power, was helpless to respond and was soon struck by 24 heavy shells, turning her into a listing, blazing wreck full of wounded and dying men. It is thought that Canberra's loss of power may have been caused by accidentally being struck by a torpedo from one of the American destroyers. The Japanese pressed home their advantage, sinking 3 additional American cruisers before making their escape. In one night, the Allies had lost 4 cruisers and suffered the deaths of over 1,000 sailors. HMAS Canberra had 84 killed or died of wounds, and another 109 wounded from her complement of 819. Among the dead was Ernest Harrison. The ship was still afloat in the morning, but was assessed as beyond repair, and Canberra was scuttled and went down in what would be renamed Iron Bottom Sound. Ernest and his young son Alan had been writing letters to each other weeks before, including lines of inquiry such as how school and music practice were going, and whether he was being big enough to help his mother. Now the husband and father of 2 was suddenly gone. A scrap of paper in the family collection survived to give a sense of the Harrisons' loss. 'Tis a sad day to remember, a day we all recall. The day we lost your dad was the saddest of them all. Ernest Harrison's name is listed on the Plymouth Naval Memorial and on the Roll of Honour to my left, among almost 40,000 Australians who died while serving in the Second World War. His photograph is displayed today by the Pool of Reflection. This is one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Electrical Artificer First Class Ernest Harrison, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the Ode and the sounding of the last post.
They have no grave but the cruel sea. No flowers lay at their head. A rusting hulk is their tombstone, a fast on the ocean bed. They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Poziere or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of the Director and staff, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support of the Memorial's development project. We wish you all a very pleasant evening. Thank you.